The first shot rang out at high noon, but it wasn't from a gunfight. It was the sound of Nora Jenkins' ancient wagon wheel finally giving up the ghost as she pulled into Rattlesnake Creek, Arizona territory, 1878. The wooden rim shattered, sending splinters across the dusty main street and causing every head to turn toward the commotion. This was not how she had planned to make her entrance. Lord have mercy, what is that racket? Old man Wilkins stepped out from his general store, squinting into the sun. Nora climbed down from her wagon, straightening her faded blue dress and pushing back a strand of copper hair that had escaped her practical bun. At 23, her face already showed the weathering of someone who had spent too many years under the harsh western sun. "My apologies for the disturbance," she said, voice steady, despite the embarrassment heating her cheeks. "I'm looking for work. I can cook, clean, sew." "Ain't hiring no women," Wilkins cut her off, eyeing her worn wagon piled with the few possessions she'd managed to salvage after her father's death. "Especially not ones who can't even keep a wagon wheel together." Laughter rippled through the growing crowd. Nora stood taller, chin raised. "I assure you, sir, I'm capable of more than you might think." "That's so?" A woman with a face pinched by years of disappointment emerged from the crowd. "We got plenty capable folks here already. Don't need another mouth taking what little work there is." "Heard there's a schoolteacher position," Nora started. "Filled yesterday," the woman replied, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. "By someone with actual credentials." Nora swallowed hard. She'd traveled 3 days on the promise of that position. "Well then, perhaps domestic work." "Girl, let me save you some time," said a man leaning against the saloon's post. "This town's got no place for useless strays. Best move on." More murmurs of agreement followed. Nora's fingers curled into her palms, nails digging into skin as she fought to maintain her composure. She hadn't cried when they buried her father, and she wouldn't cry now. "Is there someone who might fix my wheel at least?" she asked, voice remarkably steady. "For money," Wilkins replied, "which you don't look to have much of." It was then that a tall figure emerged from the livery stable across the street. The crowd parted instinctively as the man approached. Dust clung to his worn leather chaps, and his face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. When he reached the gathering, he pushed the hat back, revealing eyes the color of a summer storm. "What's all this about?" His voice was deep, carrying the easy authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "Nothing that concerns you, Sinclair," Wilkins said, suddenly less confident. Sinclair Zachariah, everyone knew his name, though few used it to his face. He was the foreman of the Crooked Arrow Ranch, the largest spread for 50 miles in any direction. "Wheel broke," he observed, kneeling to examine the damage. "Spokes rotted clean through. Surprised it made it this far." He glanced up at Nora. "Where are you coming from?" "Tucson," she answered. "Before that, Missouri." He nodded, standing to his full height again. "Long way to travel on a wheel that bad." "Didn't have much choice," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. Something in her steady stare must have impressed him, because the corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. "They're saying there's no work for me here," Nora added, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That I'm useless to this town." Sinclair looked at her for a long moment, then surveyed the crowd before turning back to her. "Then she'll be my everything here," he said clearly, his voice carrying down the street. "Crooked Arrow's been needing a capable hand with the books and household since Mrs. Peterson passed. You can read and figure, I assume." "Yes, sir. My father was a schoolteacher before his lungs gave out." Sinclair nodded. "Then it's settled. I'll have your wagon fixed and sent along." He turned to the blacksmith who had joined the gathering. "Tom, see to the repairs. Bill it to Crooked Arrow." Wilkins sputtered. "Now wait just a minute, Sinclair. You don't know a thing about this woman." "I know she drove a failing wagon 3 days across Apache country by herself," Sinclair replied evenly. "Seems resourceful enough for my purposes." He turned back to Nora. "Get what you need for tonight. We'll head out at sundown when it's cooler." The crowd dispersed, disappointed by the lack of further spectacle. Nora stood rooted to the spot, uncertain if what had just happened was real. "Thank you," she finally managed. "But I don't accept charity." Sinclair's expression remained unreadable. "It's not charity, Miss Jenkins, Nora Jenkins." "Miss Jenkins, it's employment." Fair wages for fair work. Crooked Arrow's books are a mess, and the ranch house hasn't seen a proper cleaning since winter. You'll earn your keep." He paused. "Unless you'd rather try your luck in the next town. Tombstone's about 3 days south if your wheel holds." Nora glanced at her broken wagon, then back at the man before her. His offer was unexpected, possibly even foolish on his part. But she was out of options. "I accept your offer, Mr. Zachariah." "Sinclair," he corrected. "Just Sinclair." By sunset, Nora had gathered her necessities and settled her affairs with the wagon smith. Tom had begun repairs, promising her wagon would be at Crooked Arrow within the week. As promised, Sinclair appeared with 2 horses, a chestnut mare for her, and his own midnight black stallion. "Ever ridden before?" he asked as he helped secure her bag to the saddle. "Not since I was a girl," she admitted. "Marigold here is gentle. Just hold the reins loose and follow my lead." The ride out of town was silent. Nora could feel curious eyes watching from windows and porches as they departed. She sat straight in the saddle, determined not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Once they cleared the town limits, Sinclair slowed his mount to ride alongside her. "Town's been hard hit since the silver mine dried up," he said, as if explaining the reception she'd received. "Makes people mean." "And you're immune to this meanness?" she asked. He glanced at her, surprised by her directness. "No. Just got different priorities than most. Such as hiring strange women with broken wagons." The hint of a smile touched his lips. "Crooked Arrow needs someone who can read, write, and not be afraid to speak their mind. You've already demonstrated all 3. They rode in more comfortable silence as the landscape opened around them, rolling hills dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, all painted gold by the setting sun. After about an hour, the ranch appeared on the horizon, a sprawling main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corral, all constructed of adobe and timber. As they approached, several ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse. Nora straightened instinctively, aware of their curious stares. "Boys," Sinclair called out, "this is Miss Jenkins. She'll be handling the ranch accounts and keeping the main house. Treat her accordingly." There were nods of acknowledgement, some friendly, others merely curious. An older Mexican man stepped forward. "Welcome to Crooked Arrow, señorita. I am Miguel Vasquez, segundo here." "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Vasquez," Nora replied with a small smile. "Miguel will show you to your quarters," Sinclair said, dismounting and helping Nora down from her mare. His hands were strong but careful on her waist, and she was acutely aware of their brief contact. "Get settled in. Work starts tomorrow." With that, he led both horses toward the barn, leaving Nora with Miguel. "This way, señorita," Miguel said kindly. "The housekeeper's quarters are in the main house, connected to the kitchen. It is simple, but comfortable." As they walked, Nora took in her surroundings. Crooked Arrow was clearly prosperous, the buildings well-maintained, the livestock healthy. A stark contrast to the declining town she'd just left. "How many men work here?" she asked. 22 cowboys, plus the cook and myself," Miguel answered. "And now you." "And Mr. Zachariah lives in the main house?" Miguel nodded. "See, his father built this ranch from nothing. When he passed 3 years ago, Sinclair took over. He is a good patron, fair, but expects hard work." The main house was larger than Nora had expected, a sprawling single-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, the furnishings were solid and practical, though in need of a woman's touch. A thick layer of dust covered most surfaces, and the curtains hung unevenly in their fixtures. Miguel led her to a small but clean room off the kitchen. It contained a narrow bed, washstand, chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath a window overlooking a kitchen garden gone wild with neglect. The previous housekeeper, Senora Peterson, she kept this room for 20 years, Miguel explained. She passed in her sleep this spring. "I'm sorry to hear that," Nora said quietly. "She was a good woman, very organized." Miguel gestured toward a door in the corner. "That connects to the pantry. Breakfast is at sunrise, dinner at sundown. Lunch depends on the work schedule." He paused. "Sinclair takes his meals alone most days, in his study." "I see. Rest now, señorita. Tomorrow will come early." After Miguel left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. This morning, she had been a desperate woman with dwindling resources and prospects. Tonight, she had shelter, employment, and a chance to prove her worth. She unpacked her few possessions, 3 dresses, undergarments, her father's Bible, a small box containing her mother's cameo brooch, and a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. As she placed the book on the bedside table, she noticed a folded piece of paper slipped beneath the wash basin. Curious, she unfolded it to find neat, feminine handwriting. To my successor, the ledgers are in the bottom drawer of the desk in the study. They haven't been properly kept since 1875. Sinclair won't ask for help, but he needs it. God bless you. Margaret Peterson. Nora refolded the note carefully. So, her predecessor had left her a mission of sorts. She glanced around the small room that would now be her home and felt, for the first time since her father's death, something like hope. True to Miguel's word, the next day began early. Nora woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and the distant sounds of men preparing for the day's work. She dressed quickly in her most practical dress, a brown cotton with minimal trim, and pulled her hair into its usual practical bun. The kitchen was warm and bustling when she entered. A large man with an impressive mustache was flipping tortillas on a cast-iron griddle. There she is, the mystery woman who got old Sinclair to open his mouth for more than 2 sentences at once, he boomed cheerfully. Chuck Watson, ranch cook and unofficial town crier. Hungry? Before she could answer, he placed a plate of beans, eggs, and tortillas before her. Eat up. You'll need your strength to tackle that house. Thank you, Mr. Watson. Just Chuck, miss. No need for formalities when we're all covered in the same dust. Sinclair entered as she was finishing her meal. He nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing as Chuck handed him a cup of coffee and a loaded plate. Miss Jenkins, he finally said, I'll show you the study after breakfast. The accounts need attention first. Cleaning can wait. Of course. They ate in silence, but Nora observed him carefully. In daylight, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun rather than age. His hands were calloused but clean, and despite his taciturn nature, there was nothing threatening in his presence. After breakfast, he led her to a room at the back of the house. Unlike the rest of the main house, the study was relatively orderly. Bookshelves lined one wall, a large desk dominated the center, and maps of the territory hung on another wall. This was my father's room, Sinclair explained, opening the bottom drawer of the desk. He kept all the ranch records. I've done my best, but... He pulled out several leather-bound ledgers and a stack of receipts held together with string. You'll need to sort through everything, make sense of what we've spent, what we've earned. The bank in Tucson is getting impatient about proper documentation. Nora took the ledgers, noting the haphazard entries and miscalculations evident even at a glance. When do you need this completed? Bank representative comes through in 6 weeks. She nodded, already formulating a plan. I'll need a detailed inventory of the ranch's assets, cattle count, equipment, supplies. Miguel can help with that. Anything else? Access to any correspondence with the bank, suppliers, buyers. Sinclair opened another drawer and withdrew a wooden box filled with letters. Here, some are personal. Sort them as you go. Their fingers brushed as she took the box, and Nora was startled by the unexpected warmth that rushed through her at the contact. She quickly looked down at the paperwork. I'll start right away. The sooner I understand the full picture, the better. Sinclair nodded. I'm heading out with the men to check the north pasture. Won't be back until sundown. He paused at the door. Make yourself at home, Miss Jenkins. This is your house to run now. With that, he was gone, leaving Nora alone with a mountain of disorganized accounts and a house in desperate need of attention. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Nora spent mornings organizing the ranch accounts, afternoons cleaning one room at a time, and evenings reading or mending by lamplight. Slowly, the main house transformed, dust disappeared, curtains hung properly, and floors shone with polish. The ranch ledgers proved more challenging. Years of neglect had created a tangle of numbers that required careful unraveling. Nora worked methodically, creating new ledgers with proper columns and clear entries. Sinclair remained a mystery. He left before dawn most days and returned after sunset, taking meals in his study or with the men. When their paths did cross, their conversations remained professional, limited to questions about the accounts or household needs. Yet Nora found herself increasingly aware of his presence, the sound of his boots on the porch, the scent of leather and sage that lingered after he passed through a room. She told herself it was merely the natural curiosity of a woman living in close quarters with a man she barely knew. 3 weeks after her arrival, Nora was working late in the study when a thunderstorm rolled in. The sudden crack of lightning startled her, causing her to knock over an inkwell. As she scrambled to save the papers, the study door opened. Sinclair stood there, rain-soaked and exhausted. His eyes widened at the sight of her frantically blotting ink from the desk. "I'm so sorry," she blurted. "I'll clean it up." To her surprise, he crossed the room and began helping her salvage the documents. No harm done, these things happen. Working together, they managed to contain the spill. When the crisis passed, an awkward silence fell between them. "You've made progress," Sinclair finally said, gesturing to the neat stacks of organized ledgers. "Yes. I believe I've sorted most of the accounts. The ranch is actually in better financial shape than it might appear from the disorganization." He nodded, looking relieved. "That's good news." Another silence. Rain pounded on the roof. "Will you have dinner with me tonight?" he asked suddenly. "In the dining room, not just passing in the kitchen." Nora looked up, startled by the invitation. Yes, I'd like that." He looked almost as surprised by her acceptance as she was by his invitation. "Good. I'll tell Chuck." An hour later, they sat across from each other at the long dining table that Nora had polished just days before. Chuck had outdone himself, preparing a roast with potatoes and fresh bread, clearly pleased by this development. Conversation began haltingly comments about the weather, the condition of the north pasture, the upcoming cattle drive. But as the meal progressed, Sinclair slowly revealed more of himself. "My father built this ranch with nothing but determination and a borrowed mule," he said, refilling her water glass. "He'd be pleased to see the books finally in order." "He sounds like a remarkable man." He was. Sinclair's expression softened with memory. "Taught me everything I know about ranching, except bookkeeping. That was my mother's domain, but she passed when I was just 12. "I'm sorry," Nora said quietly. "I lost my mother young as well, scarlet fever." "Your father raised you alone then?" She nodded. "He was a good man, brilliant teacher, terrible with money. When his lungs failed..." She trailed off, unwilling to detail the desperate months of watching her father waste away while their savings dwindled. "Is that why you came west, after he passed?" "Partly. There wasn't much left for me in Missouri. Teaching positions there require connections I don't have." She met his eyes. "May I ask why you hired me? Truly?" Sinclair considered her question before answering. "I recognize determination when I see it. Standing alone against a town full of strangers takes courage." "Or desperation," she added with a small smile. "Sometimes they're the same thing." His eyes held hers. "And the ranch needed someone like you. I needed..." He stopped himself, then continued more carefully. "The accounts needed proper attention." The evening continued, their conversation flowing more easily as they discovered shared interests, a love of reading, strong opinions about horses, a preference for simple food over fancy fare. By the time they finished their coffee, Nora realized 3 hours had passed. "I should let you rest," Sinclair said, rising from his chair. "You've accomplished more in 3 weeks than I managed in 3 years. At the door to her quarters, he paused. "Thank you, Miss Jenkins, not just for dinner, but for bringing order back to this place." "Nora," she said impulsively, "if we're to work together, you might as well use my given name." A smile, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, transformed his face. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Sinclair." That dinner marked a turning point. While their days remained largely separate, they began sharing evening meals regularly. Nora learned about his childhood on the ranch, his brief time at school in St. Louis, his dreams for expanding Crooked Arrow's operations. In turn, she shared stories of her own past, her father's passionate teaching, her mother's love of music, her own abandoned hopes of becoming a proper teacher. As they grew more comfortable with each other, Sinclair began inviting her to ride out with him on Sundays to see different parts of the ranch. These excursions became the highlight of Nora's week hours spent in the open air, learning about the land that was now her home. During one such ride in her 5th week at Crooked Arrow, they stopped to rest the horses near a small creek lined with cottonwoods. The day was warm, the sky an impossible blue stretching endlessly overhead. "I never thought I'd feel at peace here," Nora admitted as they sat in the shade. "When I first arrived in Arizona, everything seemed so harsh. The sun, the land, the people." "And now?" Sinclair asked, watching her carefully. "Now I see the beauty in it, the resilience." She traced patterns in the sandy soil with her fingertip. "I understand why you love it here." "The ranch has always been my home," he said, "but lately it feels more like home than before." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to acknowledge it directly. "I fixed your room," she said suddenly, changing the subject. "The window that wouldn't close properly, I found the problem was just a warped frame, a little planing, and it works fine now." Sinclair looked amused. "Is there anything you can't fix?" "Many things," she replied with a small smile. "But I like solving problems when I can." "That explains why you've managed to organize 20 years of chaotic bookkeeping in just over a month." "Almost organized," she corrected. "There are still some discrepancies I'm working through. Nothing concerning, but puzzling." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Regular payments to someone named Elena in Tucson. They're not labeled as ranch expenses, but they come from the ranch account." Sinclair's expression changed, a guarded look replacing the ease of moments before. "That's personal." "I'm sorry, I wasn't prying." "It's fine." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. "We should head back, storm clouds building to the west." The ride back was silent. The easy camaraderie of earlier, replaced by a tension Nora couldn't understand. When they reached the ranch, Sinclair dismounted quickly and took the reins of her horse. "I'll see to the horses. Thank you for your company, Miss Jenkins." The formality stung. "Sinclair, please, I have work to attend to." He led the horses away, leaving Nora confused and hurt by the sudden change. Had she overstepped by mentioning the mysterious payments? Clearly the subject touched a nerve, but his reaction seemed disproportionate to her innocent question. That evening, Sinclair did not appear for dinner. Miguel informed her that the boss had ridden into town on urgent business and wouldn't return until morning. Nora ate alone, the food tasting like ashes in her mouth. Later, unable to sleep, she returned to the study to distract herself with work. As she sorted through a stack of correspondences, a letter slipped from between 2 ledgers, an opened envelope addressed to Sinclair from Tucson. Nora knew she should simply return it to its place, but something made her hesitate. The return address matched the one on the regular payment receipts. Elena Diaz, 142 Mesquite Street. Before she could reconsider, Nora slid the letter from its envelope. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. "Dear Sinclair, thank you for your continued support. Isabella has grown 3 inches since your last visit and asks about you constantly. The doctor says her lungs are finally improving with the new medicine. I've enclosed a drawing she made for you. With gratitude, Elena." Nora's hands trembled as she returned the letter to its envelope. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them pleasant. A secret family? A mistress and child in Tucson? The thought brought an unexpected pain to her chest. She was still sitting at the desk when dawn broke, having found no answers in the long, sleepless night. The sound of hoofbeats in the yard announced Sinclair's return. Minutes later, he appeared in the study doorway, looking as exhausted as she felt. "You're up early," he observed, then noticed her drawn expression. "What's wrong?" "Who is Elena?" Nora asked directly, too tired for pretense. Sinclair's expression hardened. "You read my personal correspondence." "It fell out while I was sorting. I shouldn't have looked, but—" She met his gaze steadily. "Who is she, Sinclair? And Isabella?" He closed the door behind him and crossed to the window, staring out at the lightening sky. For a long moment, he said nothing. "Elena is my sister-in-law," he finally said, his voice low. "Isabella is my niece. My brother Thomas married Elena against our father's wishes. He was disowned, cut off completely." Nora listened silently as he continued. "Thomas died in a mining accident 3 years ago, just after father passed. Elena was alone with a sickly child and no means of support. He turned to face her. I couldn't acknowledge them publicly. My father's will had specific conditions about continuing Thomas's disinheritance, but I could ensure they were cared for. Relief washed over Nora, followed immediately by shame at her assumptions. I'm sorry, I had no right. No, you didn't, he agreed, but his tone had softened. But I should have explained rather than walking away yesterday. It's a difficult subject. You're supporting them in secret to honor both your father's wishes and your brother's memory, Nora said, understanding dawning. That's admirable. It's necessary and complicated. The bank doesn't know, can't know, or it could jeopardize the ranch's standing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. That's why I was in town. Arrangements needed to be made for their relocation. Relocation? Isabella's health is worse. They need to move east, somewhere with better medical care. His expression was pained. I was making arrangements with the bank for a larger payment, one that might be noticed if the accounts are scrutinized too carefully, Nora thought quickly. We could categorize it as an investment in eastern cattle stock. It would justify a large transfer without raising questions. Sinclair looked at her with surprise. You'd help me with this? It's not strictly ethical. It's perfectly ethical to care for family, she replied firmly. The accounting methods might be creative, but the purpose is honorable. Something shifted in his gaze as he looked at her, a warmth, an appreciation that made her heart beat faster. You continue to surprise me, Nora Jenkins. Good, she said with a small smile. I'd hate to become predictable. The tension between them dissolved, replaced by something deeper, a mutual understanding, a shared secret that bound them closer than before. In the weeks that followed, they worked together to arrange for Elena and Isabella's journey east. Nora created a paper trail of fictional cattle purchases, while Sinclair made discreet arrangements through trusted contacts. Their collaboration extended beyond the workday, with evenings spent planning in the study, often stretching into late-night conversations by the fireplace. As they worked side by side, Nora became increasingly aware of Sinclair, the intensity in his eyes when he concentrated, the rare but transformative smile that appeared more frequently in her presence, the careful way he always ensured her comfort before his own. She found herself inventing reasons to be near him, to extend their time together. For his part, Sinclair seemed equally drawn to her. His gaze followed her movements when he thought she wasn't looking. He began bringing her small gifts from his rides, a particularly beautiful stone, wildflowers that matched her eyes, a book from the town's small store. The arrival of Nora's repaired wagon went unmentioned by both of them, the implication of her potential departure too uncomfortable to acknowledge. 6 weeks after Nora's arrival, the bank representative from Tucson, Mr. Hollister, arrived at Crooked Arrow. Sinclair and Nora presented the meticulously organized accounts together, explaining each entry with practiced ease. If Hollister noticed anything unusual about the cattle investment entries, he gave no indication. Well, Mr. Zachariah, Hollister said when they had finished, I must say I'm impressed. These records are the most comprehensive I've seen from Crooked Arrow. The bank will be quite satisfied. Miss Jenkins deserves the credit, Sinclair said, his pride evident. She's brought order to chaos. Hollister turned his attention to Nora. Indeed, remarkable work, especially for someone new to ranching. Numbers are numbers, Mr. Hollister, she replied modestly. Whether they represent cattle or cotton makes little difference. After Hollister departed with his copies of the ledgers, a celebratory mood filled the ranch. Chuck prepared a special dinner, and even the Cowboys stopped by the main house to offer congratulations. That evening, as the celebration wound down, Sinclair found Nora on the porch, gazing at the stars that blanketed the desert sky. Thank you, he said, joining her at the railing, for everything you've done here. It's my job, she replied simply. No, your job was to organize the books. You've done far more than that. He turned to face her fully. You've made this house a home again. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Sinclair, I need to say this, he interrupted gently. When you drove into Rattlesnake Creek with that broken wheel, I thought you were just another drifter passing through. Then I saw how you stood up to the town, refusing to be diminished by their judgment, and I knew you were different. He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. I told them you'd be my everything here. I didn't realize how true those words would become. Nora's heart hammered in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that this ranch, this life, none of it means what it once did without you in it. His voice lowered. I'm asking if you'll stay, Nora. Not as my housekeeper or bookkeeper, but as my partner, my wife. The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. People will talk, she whispered. They'll say you only married me because I was useful. Let them talk. His hand gently cupped her cheek. We'll know the truth that you're not just useful, you're essential. Not just to the ranch, but to me. Nora leaned into his touch, all the feelings she'd been trying to deny rushing to the surface. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the desert as he drew her closer. When his lips met hers, Nora knew she had found not just employment or shelter, but home. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch. Miguel stood as witness, and Chuck baked a wedding cake that threatened to collapse under its own ambition. The Cowboys formed an honor guard with raised lariats for the new couple to walk under. Word of their marriage spread quickly to Rattlesnake Creek. Some townsfolk sniffed disapprovingly at the hasty union, but others, noting the transformation of both Sinclair and his once struggling ranch, began to reassess their judgment of the woman they had dismissed as useless. Old Man Wilkins was among the first to change his tune when Sinclair began ordering twice the usual supplies for the ranch, insisting that Nora handle the arrangements personally. Her business kept his store afloat through a difficult season, a fact he grudgingly acknowledged with a tip of his hat when they passed on the street. 3 months after their wedding, a letter arrived from Boston. Elena wrote that Isabella was thriving under the care of a specialist, her condition improving daily. She enclosed a drawing from the child, a stick-figure family, that now included Aunt Nora alongside Uncle Sinclair. We should invite them to visit, Nora suggested as they sat together on the porch that evening. When Isabella is strong enough to travel, this is their family home, too. Sinclair looked at her with wonder. Do you know how remarkable you are? I'm beginning to believe it, she replied with a smile. Someone very wise once told me I was his everything. It's hard not to feel valued after that. He pulled her close, his arm warm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They called you useless in town, he murmured against her hair. They couldn't have been more wrong. Their loss was my gain, Nora replied, nestling closer. And yours, mine most of all. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, planning their future together, the expansion of the ranch, the children they hoped for, the life they were building day by day. Above them, stars emerged one by one, witnessing the quiet miracle of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. In the distance, coyotes called to one another across the vastness, their voices echoing the ancient truth that even in the harshest landscapes, nothing is truly useless, and everything with love can find its purpose.